Welcome back to another episode of Tech Unhinged, where tech gets human. I'm your host, Rabia Javed. Today, we are joined by someone who understands what it takes to build safer, stronger, and more resilient organizations in complex, high-risk environments. Angelica is a senior health safety environment leader with over 16 years of experience across diverse industries, including regulated and high-risk sectors. She currently serves at OEC Energy and Infrastructure, where she leads enterprise-wide initiatives with a strong emphasis on leadership accountability, organizational culture, and prevention outcomes. Welcome to Tech Unhinged, Angelica.
Thank you, Rabia. Very happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
So, Angelica, you've built your career around protecting people and shaping culture. What first drew you into occupational health and safety as a profession?
So, my path into occupational health and safety was shaped by something very personal. Growing up, I heard stories about my great uncle losing his right arm in an industrial accident because there was no guarding on the machine he was working with. So, that stayed with me, and not just because of the injury, but because of how his life and trajectory changed. Because he was young, he had a promising career ahead of him, and overnight that future completely changed, and it impacted him at so many different levels, even his confidence, his independence. So as a child, I didn't really understand the technical reasons behind what happened, but what I understood was that something preventable had permanently altered someone's life path. And so later, when I entered the workplace, I realized that those outcomes aren't random. They're really connected to decisions of how work is designed, what leaders prioritize, and whether risks are addressed before something happens. So that realization was deeply personal for me. And I realized that safety isn't about compliance, it's about protecting people's lives and their futures.
Most of the times, while I speak to safety leaders, there's always a personal story behind who they are today. Angelica, you recently shared a powerful reflection about mentorship while I was going through, your leadership stance on your LinkedIn, be it on legacy and the impact leaders have beyond deliverables. When you think about your career so far, what does legacy mean to you as a safety leader?
So legacy for me, it's about preventing harm before it happens. And for me, it's about whether or not I can share something or model something, someone understand risk differently. So when I train people, when I have conversations, and when something clicks, and a leader really sees the potential consequence of their decisions, that changes outcomes. And so, when I talked earlier about my great uncle, that could have prevented that workplace injury. And that, sharing that knowledge and really influencing leaders to recognize that risk before something happens and acting earlier before someone's life is impacted, that's what legacy is for me. It's tough in the safety profession because we're often measured on the things that don't happen. So that's very challenging. But, when nothing happens because someone applied that knowledge and a different outcome occurred, then that invisible protection to me is my legacy.
I think that's a great way to go about it. All right. So, Angelica, if we dive a bit into the topic now, while we talk about redefining safety leadership, we see that many organizations still see safety as a compliance exercise. From your perspective, what does it really mean to move beyond compliance?
So compliance to me is the floor. It's not the goal, essentially the bare minimum. So moving beyond compliance means focusing on the upstream drivers of safety performance. I often describe this as leadership influencing culture and culture driving those behaviors determining different outcomes. So when organizations only focus on compliance or injury statistics, they're reacting to results. It's already too late. They're not taking the steps to shape the condition that produce those results. So strong safety performance really does start with leadership decisions. And that to me is moving beyond compliance really is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how does true safety leadership show up, on a day to day, especially at the executive and board level?
So leadership really shows up in everyday signals that people receive. It's about what leaders prioritize and the decisions and the responses more so when things go wrong. So if we're going into situations where something occurs, somebody gets injured, and there is blame after that incident, that signals it's about blame, right? So when I go into investigations, I often say it's fact finding, not blame finding. So those signals really shape that culture, and that culture shapes the behaviors. Leaders understanding that their actions have a direct line to safety outcomes, whether leaders realize it or not, is really what it means to show up as a true leader. every day.
So, Angelica, you did sort of reflect upon it, what I'm going to ask you, now. But in your experience, if you have to state it explicitly, what separates organizations that just do compliance, for the sake of it, and what differentiates them from the ones who genuinely embed safety into their culture?
So the biggest difference is truly ownership. So in compliance focused environments, safety belongs to the safety team. But in strong cultures, safety belongs to leaders. Protecting their people is really something that they own. So organizations that excel truly understand that the outcomes are the result of their behaviors and what they prioritize. There's been different examples throughout history, but there's been CEOs that set safety as truly the priority. And that is what drives that behavior and the reduction of accidents and prioritizing people. So culture is never accidental, truly.
That's very true. How do you see AI changing the way safety leaders operate today?
So AI is changing safety leadership primarily by improving visibility to risk. So what I mean is AI gives leaders earlier insights into patterns, conditions, and behaviors that influence outcomes. So we're starting to see a range of technologies across the industry. For example, there's robots that can be used to perform inspections or access environments that may pose risk to people, or things like wearable technologies or systems like industrial exoskeletons, which are essentially devices that are worn over the body to support movement and reduce strain during physical demanding tasks. Those approaches reduce exposure by providing better information to leaders. But what's important and what fundamentally doesn't change is that leadership still has a role to play, and that technology or the AI doesn't replace leadership judgment. It raises the bar for it because better information should lead to better decisions, and leaders are still accountable how the information is used.
So, Angelica, from your vantage point, where can AI genuinely add value to safety outcomes, and where should leaders be cautious about it?
So AI and emerging technologies add the most value when they help reduce exposure and provide better information to support decisions, as I mentioned earlier. So, when we look at robots that can conduct safety assessment on construction sites and in hazardous environments, they identify the conditions that may pose risk without exposing the people directly. And that information is incredibly useful. But as I mentioned, it doesn't replace that leadership aspect because leaders still need to be present. They need to have conversations with teams, understand context, and ensure that corrective actions and measures are actually taking place, because that insight that technology provides doesn't create accountability and it doesn't drive culture. So I would say that leaders have to be cautious about that over-reliance, because what happens is AI and technology can create a false sense of security if people assume risk has been eliminated rather than changed. So AI ultimately provides knowledge, not the solution itself. We still need engagement and leadership judgment, as those remain essential.
Absolutely. And how do you ensure technology supports better decisions rather than distancing leaders from the realities on the ground?
Yeah, so again, one of the risks is around the access to more information, but that creates perhaps an illusion of understanding all factors surrounding work and people. So leaders do need to remain closer to the work because they have more data, but the information alone can't capture the context, the nuance, or the human factors that influence outcomes, because ultimately employees understand their work best. They know the variability, the challenges, and the reality that aren't always visible or apparent through technology or AI. So the tools do have a pitfall in perhaps oversimplifying situations or missing important nuances that are especially true in complex environments. So technology supports better decisions, but it really comes down to maintaining connection to the workforce. Leaders need to spend time where work is happening, ask questions, understand how tasks are actually performed, and listen to the people doing the tasks, and use that technology to highlight patterns or potential risks. But conversations and relationships are ultimately what provide the real insight. And so the goal is to use AI and technology to inform judgment, not replace that engagement. When the leaders combine information with frontline knowledge, decisions do improve significantly. And we've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, If we talk about the ethical side of AI now, AI often raises concerns around surveillance, data privacy, and trust. So, how should safety leaders navigate these concerns while maintaining credibility with their own workforce?
That's a great question. I think that, trust is really the foundation when introducing new technology and AI. People need to essentially understand why it's being used and how it benefits them. Because if employees perceive technology as monitoring or surveillance rather than support, that credibility can erode very quickly and the relationship as well. And I'll give you an example with wearable technology like industrial exoskeletons. The devices are designed to support the body during those physically demanding tasks. But it's important that employees understand that intent because what it's trying to do is to reduce the strain and help prevent injury, not to do things like monitoring how many breaks somebody takes or how fast they're working. So in order to, ensure that this technology launch or AI launch is effective and successful, that clarity comes from leadership communication and involvement. Employees should be engaged early, understand the purpose, and have some input in how that technology is used. And that will drive trust increasing significantly because ultimately credibility comes down to the alignment between what leaders are communicating and the employee experience. So if people believe that the technology is there to protect them, adoption will follow. If they believe it's about control, resistance follows.
No, that was a very interesting point that you made there. So, Angelica, if we look at safety critical environments, we know that human judgment is really essential there. How do leaders strike the right balance between automation and accountability these days?
So automation can reduce human error in some situations, which is very a truly positive thing, but that accountability never disappears. Leaders remain responsible for how systems are designed, implemented, and monitored, and they need to really be involved every step of the way because human judgment is still essential, especially when the conditions change or something unexpected happens. So again, a tool, not the ultimate solution.
Absolutely. A very relevant question to what most of the people have been asking around these days. What ethical responsibilities do leaders carry when introducing AI into environments where people's lives and well-beings are at stake?
So when leaders introduce AI or new technologies into these environments where both safety and well-being is or are involved, the ethical responsibility is significant because those decisions directly affect how people experience work, their sense of safety, and sometimes their livelihoods. And technology isn't neutral. It changes how decisions are made, how work is performed, and how people are supported. So leaders are responsible not just for whether someone works technically, but how it impacts people in practice. And that ethical leadership in this space means being intentional about purpose, transparency, and consequences. Just because a technology has the capability to do something, it doesn't automatically mean it should be implemented without understanding the broader impact on people and culture. So ultimately, introducing AI, again, doesn't take away from that leadership responsibility. It increases it. And leaders remain accountable for those decisions they make and the outcomes of how people experience those decisions.
Yeah, yeah. And now when we move on to the next section of our podcast where we're going to talk about, leadership capability in the age of AI, I know that this question is going to probably resonate on a very personal level with you as well. That as technology evolves, how must the role of the safety leader evolve alongside it?
So the role as a safety leader has to evolve from being primarily compliance focused to being much more integrated into leadership decision making. So safety leaders can't just understand the risks, they need to understand the technology, the operations, and human behavior and how it interacts with the system or the technology. So what that means is stronger systems thinking and the ability to interpret information and the confidence to influence decisions at higher levels of the organization. So truly the safety role becomes more about judgment and less so about enforcement because technology can provide the data, but leaders still need to understand what the information means and what actions matter the most. And that's where the safety leader needs to bridge those two. In that, safety leaders become strategic advisors. They help leaders anticipate risk, make better decisions, and balance performance with protection using that technology. Technology doesn't reduce the need for safety leadership, it increases the expectations for it.
So, Angelica, given all of this, what do you think? What are the new skills or mindsets you believe that future safety leaders will need to succeed in an AI-enabled world?
So I think the biggest shift for future safety leaders is mindset. Technology will continue to evolve quickly, and leaders need to be comfortable learning continuously and adapting, not waiting until they feel like experts. So curiosity becomes important, understanding what new tools can do, but also questioning their limitations. AI can provide information, but the leaders still need that critical thinking, and safety leaders specifically to interpret and decide what matters. So courage becomes another key capability as well. As technology changes how organizations operate, safety leaders will need the confidence to speak up and challenge decisions constructively when risk is high. And underlying all of that is human connection. No matter how advanced technology becomes, leadership still involves trust, communication, and relationship, much more in the safety space. And we need to be able to balance that technical curiosity with strong human awareness, and that will lead to the most effectiveness and most success around it.
Absolutely. See, Angelica, we know that leadership is not just about leading, but it's mostly about empowering your people. So, how can leaders today ensure frontline teams feel empowered enough as much as they do and not feel replaced by digital and AI driven tools?
I would say involve them as early as possible, because when people participate in the solution, and in this case, in how technology is introduced, whether it's robotics, wearable support system, or any other AI tools, they're more likely to trust it and use it effectively. So it's about that buy-in, right? And respect for that frontline expertise is also fundamental. As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of complex environments and nuances. So technology is really there to support people, not to replace them.
So, diving into the future and the legacy, looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what does excellent safety leadership look like in a more data-driven and automated world to Angelica?
So in the next 5 to 10 years, excellent safety leadership will look less like owning a safety program and more like shaping how decisions are made across the organization. So the strongest organization will use that data and technology to identify risks earlier and learn faster and prioritize the controls that actually reduce the exposure. And that's really where the future is. But the real differentiator won't be the tools. It'll be how leaders integrate them responsibly and how they stay connected to the work, and they involve that frontline expertise, and they ensure that information leads to action, not just reporting. So it's definitely going to be more around integration in a more automated world. And safety leadership will be defined by decision quality, trust, and follow through. The future isn't data-driven safety, it's vision-driven safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the last question to our podcast, Angelica, for emerging safety professionals listening to you today, what advice would you give them about building a career that not only delivers results, but truly shapes safer futures?
I would say focus on understanding people and organizations, not just regulations. Really integrate yourself into the organization, understand the culture, understand the people, and build that credibility through relationships, integrity, and curiosity. Always ask questions. And remember that safety leadership isn't about authority, it's about influence. The goal isn't compliance, it's truly to protect the lives of the people that work there.
Absolutely. Well, Angelica, thank you so much for your grounded and insightful conversation with us today.
Thank you so much. So happy to be part of this great conversation.
Well, and to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on Tech Unhinged. We'll see you next time.